Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Invite Me In podcast. My name is Jonathan Brock, and this is Dr. Jocelyn Taylor.
Hello, nice to see you again.
And this is where experience and passion come to heal. Today we have a very special guest who's joined us, and we're excited to introduce her here in a moment and have her give her perspective on a very important aspect of our SHIVER-B model, the household practices piece. Just as a reminder, we've developed the SHIVER-B model to help everyone out there understand that every human being on earth has a personal cultural framework. In other words, what is it that has developed us and what is our identity? What things have contributed to us over time that has made us into who we are? How do we identify ourselves? We believe that the SHIVER-B model, these 7 pieces are a critical aspect of our identity, and it's a personal cultural framework. Just as a reminder, these pieces of our identity, our personal cultural framework, our spirituality, our household practices, our interaction styles, our value systems, our ethnicity and race, our religious beliefs, and our belief systems. Today, we're going to do a deep dive into how our household practices, how we have grown up, how we were trained and raised in our home and in our family environment, the way we interacted with our family, and especially the things that we've been taught growing up in our family dynamic, how they influence us today and how they contribute to our identity.
And Jonathan, I have to say I've been so excited to be able to talk to Randy Teton about this.
Oh.
I mean, we all have household practices, but I'm so excited to hear about hers. She has some really wonderful ideas for us.
I'm with you, Dr. Taylor. Randy L. specifically has a very unique story about how her household practices and how her upbringing, her cultural beliefs, her value system, her family have influenced her now as an adult in her own life and in her professional world. So she's going to give a very unique perspective, and we're really excited to hear about it.
Excited about it.
So
Can I remind everyone what our definition of household practices are?
Let's do that, please.
So this is what we have come up with. Household practices are methods, thinkings, routines that exist within a certain family or home dynamic, which can be, but are not always, influenced by ethnicity or the traditional cultural beliefs in that family. These practices include traditions, roles, rules, attitudes, modeled or accepted behaviors, notions and approaches to time, material possessions, and the modeled lifestyles of the people with whom everyone lives or are reared with. So let me just say the notions and approaches to time, as an example of what that could be. I remember being invited to go to a party, and this is when I lived in Venezuela. They told me to come at 3, so I went at 3. And they were shocked to see me because people usually don't arrive until 6. So their notion of time was different from what I had been trained and expected to do. So just a little caveat there.
I'm glad you brought that up. It's a perfect example of that overarching idea that how we are raised and how our family interactions growing up, how they influence us today and how we see the world and how we behave and interact. So with that particular part of our personal cultural framework, household practices, we'd like to introduce our dear friend, sister, and colleague, Randy Teton. Randy, welcome to the Invite Me In podcast show.
Thank you both. Zandave, good day in my language. My name is Randy Teton. I serve as the model for the Sacagawea Golden Dollar and definitely have a story for everyone based off of my experience of being a Native American woman working in 2 worlds as a Native American woman in the professional world on and off the reservation.
Mm-hmm. You were actually we've known each other for about 7 years, Randy, and I remember several times you talking about this in public or initiatives we've been working at together. You've always taken that approach of, hey, I walk in two worlds, I live in two worlds. And you, in my opinion, are one of the people who's done that most successfully over time. So we get to hear today about how you've been able to do that.
And what does that look like? You say walking in two worlds.
Yeah.
It seems to me being on the reservation and then being in a typical American workplace, two different things. What does that look like, and how did you manage to be so successful?
Yeah, what does that look like for you? Walking in two worlds. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, I think that it's always important to know the beginning of a story.
Sure.
And my story started on the Fort Hall Reservation, which is located in southeastern Idaho. Born and raised on the reservation. I am the one of the oldest of five children. And being an oldest sister, I took on a lot of the housekeeping roles of taking care of my younger siblings. And I think that having that foundation of learning at a very young age of being able to cook and take care of the home, it has a lot to do with our traditions as well as a Shoshone and Bannock woman. In my family, our religion is the Native American religion, and that is we are protectors of the landscape. We are nurturers. We believe in a higher God. We refer to him as Duma Uppa. And of course, God has a lot of names in different religions. So we do have the same belief of a higher being protecting, and praying every day was a big part of my upbringing. We prayed in what we call a sweat lodge. My dad owned one. It was on property, and we would have family members in our own internal family, and also people from Fort Hall come up and sweat with us, which is basically praying with us. And so having that upbringing of the belief of God, and always praying every morning. My grandmother would always say, first thing in the morning when you get up is look towards the sun and give thanks for being here, for the life that we have, and for the protection of our children in our home. And so always having that as my foundation has always helped me bring me stability, and acknowledging our former ancestors that fought hard to give what we have today. And not only the sweat lodge, but also the use of our local medicines, the cedar trees, the sagebrush, a lot of the roots that are in this area. We utilized all of them as part of our prayer. And I still utilize these in my home with my children. I'm a mother of three. I have two sons and a daughter. And all of the things that I learned, we do practice daily. Also, having grandparents that spoke our language. I was raised in the Bannock way. My grandparents are Bannock and Paiute. And so having that language, songs, just that way of life, it has given me balance. It has provided me the strength to do what I need to do as a single parent, and to provide that stability and foundation for my children, specifically having two sons, having them be able to understand how prayer is so essential for their future as future husbands, future warriors of our community. I really think that just overall, the power of prayer, utilizing the sweat lodge. We also practice Sundance, which I am a sun dancer in my family. My father and myself were both sun dancers. And to become a sun dancer, it's a gift that's given to an individual. So it's not that you can just say, oh, one day I'm going to be a sun dancer. It's actually a gift that the Creator provides to you in certain forms. And I was given that gift. And so every July, my father and we practice the sun dance, which is fasting for a total of 3 nights and 4 days. It is a process that takes a lot from a person to give for the better good. And I really do believe that also has given me a solid foundation of becoming who I am today, in walking in two worlds. I do believe that, one needs the power of prayer and belief in yourself in order to be successful, and to surround yourself with family for support and love. And that's what I do. I actually have to admit that I am a deadly auntie. I've been given that title by some family members because.
So what does that mean? What is a deadly auntie? I love it.
Deadly auntie is one that is always available to help a family member out. I open up my home. I feed my family. I always make sure they're taken care of if they need a ride. I mean, it can be a variety of different things, but just always being available to give the love and the support that they may need, because everyone has something going on in their life. And being an older sibling, I feel that I get a lot of responsibilities of just being called upon, asked help out when needed. And so I really do take that title seriously. And it's kind of funny, but, again, that's just the role that I think a lot of Native American women play in tribal communities.
Sure.
And
I'm just curious. So the deadly auntie, does it also include course correction when you see that your nieces and nephews or family members need a course correction?
Of course.
Okay.
Yes. And motivation, and just an open ear as needed. So I'm not only just balancing out being a mother and a professional, but also being a deadly auntie to my nieces and nephews. And also not only that, but, being a devoted daughter, a sibling, and then also just always contributing back to my community. That's a big part of me. I don't just take it for granted that I'm a tribal member of a tribe. I actually do have a lot of commitment towards making my community a better place, a safer place for my relations. I come from a very large family. I think I'm related to about 70% of the tribe. Both of my parents come from a large family of 12 children. And so you can imagine having a lot of cousins and a lot of aunties and a lot of uncles. And so with that comes a lot of responsibility of upholding your name, and just being able to give back.
I think that's beautiful. There's one thing that you said that I was curious about. Can I?
Please, yeah, Dr. Taylor, go ahead, please.
So when you said helping the next generation become warriors, I'm very fascinated with that, because there is some research, and we've talked about it on this show previously, research on the generational trauma that the American Indian population has suffered. And so when you talk about learning to be warriors, I think that's a lovely, positive slant. So what does that look like? Do they become warriors when they embrace the prayers and the meaning behind the prayers?
When they embrace their household practices, they embrace their upbringing, their value system growing up. Yeah. How does that all influence together, Randy, in your opinion? How can they take that forward and take what they've learned and grown up with, like you've talked about so beautifully? How do they take that now and then empower themselves and other people moving forward outward? I like that. Yeah, that's great.
Well, traditionally, well, traditionally, within my tribe, the Shoshone and the Bannock, when a young boy becomes a young man, and if we go back 200 years ago, that would actually be around the age of about 14, 15 years old, where a young man would be allowed to go on a hunt, not a hunting party, but a raid, where he's mentally and physically ready to defend our community, our home, our families, and that had a lot to do with, that protection included killing another man if needed. And again, I'm going way back to when we had when we were all fighting over land, and preventing our women and from being taken from our people. So we're talking about some serious factors that would come into play for a young individual to become a warrior. Now, today, to become a warrior is a whole different thing. For us today, it's about graduating from high school, and that's where you would begin your next phase in life as a young man, to take on a wife, take on a home, and really be given the ability to be independent and have that foundation of prayer and stability and success. And, again, my role as a mother does not stop at the age of 18. I will continue to be supportive and, be there for my children as far as they need me to, if that's in their 50s or 60s.
Absolutely.
Sure. So, culturally, we are a very tight-knit family, and we always tend to rely upon our older aunties or uncles or grandparents, and now we're getting to a new era where a lot of our elders that spoke our language fluently, they're passing on, and so we have this new generation of young elders. I am definitely not even close to being an elder, but I tend to think that it's coming to a time where things are definitely changing for my people culturally.
Sure.
I understand our language, but I do not speak it fluently. My grandparents are both part of the boarding school era. And so knowing their history.
So they've got trauma from that era, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, but it's not as bad as what happened in Canada. The Canadian boarding school stories are a far more dire and worse than ours here in the United States. I mean, the Carlisle boarding school that happened in the Midwest is terrible. But here in Fort Hall, we had about 2 boarding schools, the largest being right by Chauvin High School. And in my previous work, when working for the tribes, I actually took tour groups out there so we can acknowledge and give respect to our elders that were sent to boarding schools, not by choice, but forced. And my grandpa actually played in the band, and he played in the baseball team. And so a lot of the pictures that they have of Fort Hall Boarding School do include my grandfather, which is my dad's dad.
Randy, you have just given an extremely comprehensive and tender, and I would even say sacred definition and overview of your upbringing, your household practices, your spiritual and religious beliefs, your value systems, all wrapped up into how you've been brought up and how they have influenced you. Thank you for sharing that piece and sharing this introduction to who you are and where you've come from. One of the points we're trying to drive home to everybody is that what you just shared about who you are, where you've come from, and why you believe and what you do, it is an integral part of who we are, and that other people need to be invited in or take the opportunity to learn these things about us. For example, for you, those who watch this podcast in the future will learn this aspect of your personal culture. framework, your household practices, your upbringing, and now look at how you've described they've influenced the way you think and act as an adult, as a parent, as an auntie, as a community member. Let's take this and tie this to how do you feel everything you've just shared with us about your personal cultural framework, your household practices, your upbringing? How do you take that and then use that to influence the communities around us, the local community, the state, the national level? Can you tell us how you have used this effectively to teach and educate people in your profession and the different roles that you've played? How can you use your cultural framework to teach others, and what do they need to know about that so they can learn from that? How do you impact other people now in the world around you because of what you've shared and where you've come from, so to speak?
Well, communication is always key to delivering any message.
Mhm.
And I feel as a Native American woman, I am not afraid to share my story and to share the fact that we as Native peoples are still alive and thriving today, even though we're here on the Fort Hall Reservation. And everywhere I go, it's been important to be able to tell my story and educate those. And I think a lot of people don't realize that we as Native American people are thriving. They see a lot of stereotype roles in movies and TVs, and they still think that we live in teepees and ride horses and don't own cars. And so, given the role that I have had in the past, I'm always glad to take questions and answers so they can have a better understanding of who we are as Native peoples today. We're professionals. We drive cars. We live in homes.
Yeah.
We pay taxes. We pay for medical services just like anybody else. There's a lot of stereotypes out there in the communities everywhere. But I think one thing for me is I've always been given the chance to do cultural sensitivity trainings.
Right.
And that I feel has been very key in giving awareness to federal, state staff, nonprofit organizations, so they understand why we do what we do. And for example, why do our young men have long hair? Why do they have a braid that may look like a girl's ponytail? There's a lot of things that a lot of people don't understand why we do things. And even down to powwows, I think that a lot of people generalize the tribal dancers as being from one tribe, but you actually have a variety of different tribes representing their own cultures within that dance circle. And as a individual looking upon them, I can actually identify what tribe they come from. Just based upon the colors and their beadwork designs and their feathers that they wear. So there's definitely differences between the tribes. You go from the East Coast to the West Coast to the desert to Alaskan. You can all tell that we have different looks and different way of how we are perceived by others. But and those are the things that I like to talk about.
Sure.
And I think that is important that we're opening up a new topic that is not brought up.
Yes.
And you can't buy a book either. There's not a whole lot of books out there that you can just pick up and kind of better understand Native American history.
Sure.
So,
Randy, thank you for explaining that and sharing that. That's where we're trying to go with our SHIVER-B model, is taking who we are, where we've come from, what we believe, what we've been created into by those around us, especially in our formative years. Taking what you've just said, let's switch gears here for a second, and would like to ask you a specific question about now how to take that and create bipartisanship and create teams and understanding. Before I ask this question, though, I just have to tout you for a second. I met you 7 years ago in a role that we had together. I've been at your side many times and in many different ways on different initiatives. I've seen the different roles you've played. We've done work together. One of the things I've always respected about you is you have taken who you are, your upbringing, the love for the Teton name, the love for the land, your history, your heritage. You always take that in some way, and then you apply it in a professional way somehow. Because of who you are as a Native American woman, and where you've come from and what you have been raised to believe, it's now part of your framework. It's who you are. You're showing us that in this podcast. Where you've come from and what you believe is now what you practice. It's your passion, and you teach it in two worlds. You take it from the world of the reservation, the sacred spiritual cultural life of your tribe, and you now relate it in so many ways to the professional world. I remember us being in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho a few years ago for a conference, and I sat in on your conference, and you taught these people from all over the state who were responsible for every board of education and every student's education in Idaho, and you taught the tribe's beliefs and you taught your own beliefs. So in that context, could you take what you've shared with us about who you are, where you've come from, your own personal framework? What does it look like for things like education, public, private, industry, government? How can we take this topic and of our own household practices and the influence on ourselves? How do we take that and we do away with misunderstandings, and we do away with contention? How can your and each person's personal framework of where they've come from, how can that influence people on a grand scale and pull people together, especially in the professional world where there's so much conflict? We believe that a lack of understanding of each person's cultural framework is probably one of the biggest contributors to misunderstandings, politics, contention, anger. What say you, Randy, on how we take where we've come from and who we are, particularly in your context, and how do we make the world a better place, especially in the adult world, the decision-making people in the world? How do we do that?
Depending on who's listening to this podcast in whatever state they reside in, and they're talking about culture, I would highly recommend reaching out to the local tribal government. Reach out to somebody within the tribe so that way they can be engaged to tell their story from a tribal perspective. So each year there is a holiday called the Native American Heritage Month, and this is celebrated in the month of November. This is nationwide. I would highly recommend that public schools, private schools recognize this holiday and invite a tribal speaker to be part of the curriculum or do an assembly. It really does start with adding in a cultural element.
Okay.
Now, I think the state of Idaho, specifically my region, Southeastern, I think they're pretty lucky because I know a lot of people around here. I attended public school. I did not attend tribal school. I did attend public school. So I know a lot of people within my community on and off the reservation here. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people trusted me and engaged with me. So I would go to the schools and I would do talks about Native American Heritage Month. I would talk about my tribe, specifically because these are the local tribes living in this area. Now, when it comes to off the reservation and in the other states, mm-hmm. I always would engage with other tribal people, tribal historians, tribal elders, to be part of including them to be a part of the bigger topic of cultural identity, tribal issues. What are they facing? Every tribe is different, and I think that's what needs to be taught, is that we are not all the same. Not our issues is not going to apply with what's happening in Utah or Wyoming or Montana. everyone has their own different issues. Now, I've been very fortunate because I've worked with a lot of tribal chairmen throughout the nations, and there are going to be some similar issues that we all need to come together and unite for a unified voice. And that's where I've learned a lot. And for me, it's like I'm learning still today. I enjoy it. I feel like I'm a sponge, I'm enjoying it because it only allows me to speak more to tribal issues. Again, that has a lot to do with my communication skills, but I still do some side, projects. And I enjoy them because I'm able to provide that tribal perspective. So I think it all comes together. Definitely going back to my foundation, having that understanding of our culture, having that understanding of success. My motivation was me. I always felt like we needed to have more tribal people in the professional world off the reservation. I always had that. Nobody really planted that seed. It was something that I learned when I was 14, working for the Tribal Museum and seeing all these tourists come in and want to buy tribal books. And at that time, this is in the 90s, and there were no books that were authored by Native American authors. So I really wanted to change the narrative. I wanted to go to school. I wanted to be able to be a future author. And today I have the opportunity to work in communications, luckily. So I think that everything kind of came together for a reason. I really do believe that people cross your paths for reasons. Opportunities cross your paths for a reason, and I gladly accept them. And I feel like I put 100% in everything that I do.
That's fabulous. When we were speaking earlier, you talked about a saying that you identify yourself with, the moccasin. Can you talk about that just a little bit?
Yeah, love
I don't
that.
think you've mentioned that yet.
Yeah.
Well, given everything that I've mentioned, for me being a Native American woman and working in the professional sectors that I have had, being in moccasins one day and then being in heels the other day,
Yes.
To me, it's always been a walk in two worlds because I maintain my cultural heritage and the pride and the love that I have for my culture. But I also understand and recognize the professionalism that I need to play as a Native American profession, working off the reservation and working with people, building bridges that are much needed. I enjoy that immensely. And that is one thing I talk to my children, I talk to my family, friends that I have. It's really important that we have more people that think like this, that can hold that heritage close and also be able to speak off the reservation and work with non-tribal entities.
Well, I think that describes it just beautifully. Moccasins one day and high heels on the next day.
But it's true. It's because what she's telling us is she could, Randy, you can still embrace who you are and where you've come from and how that shaped you into who you are. But you can also go into the other world and influence people because of your own personal culture for good. So question for you, and I'll keep this one short.
Okay.
What is your...
Short means 5 words.
Randy and I have an ongoing joke for years. It's like, all right, let's. Yeah, but I love that. I'm actually kind of glad that came up today, Randy, because we appreciate you, and we want this to be a fun podcast too, and you're a good sport. Here's the question that is just really on my mind. In your last description about public relations and connecting the worlds together through your PR, you talked about outreach. You talked about education, and in a way, you kind of, in your own way, said people need to want to be invited into, in your case, your culture and understanding. So my question to you is, what is your call to action to people right now in a world where it's so increasingly divided? What is your call to action to try and bring people together?
My call to action would be for those listeners that are delving into cultural sensitivity, wanting to understand more about any culture, is to bring them in. Invite the cultures to be part of your discussion. Invite them into your staff meetings, your manager meetings. If you are part of a school board, and you're close to a reservation, I would say open up a seat for a tribal person to take that seat, because a lot of our Native American youth do attend school off the reservation. And that has a lot to do with our housing issues that we have with the tribes. A lot of our people are living off the reservations now because there's a lack of housing. So therefore, you have a higher population of Native American kids going to school in the public school systems, which is important to understand that even our Native kids have they have to have certain needs of understanding, and having the counselors understand why they may be quiet, why they may need help.
Can I just say, I don't mean to interrupt you, but can I just say I'm so pleased to hear this. One of the training pieces that we've done with schools is invite that child in and let that child and the parent talk about their household practices. Mm-hmm. Because that may explain why a child is learning in a certain manner. Mm-hmm. And particularly, my world is special education. We want to make sure that if a child is being identified as a student with a disability, that it's not because of his or her culture.
Absolutely.
So special educators invite that child in, invite the parent in, talk about those household practices so that you know what is valuable to that child. Don't make assumptions. So I didn't mean to interrupt, but that made me very happy to hear you say invite them in.
That is the impetus of our cultural model, Randy, is to help educators, people in industries, understand their colleagues, their coworkers in education. It's to understand their students by saying, teach me about where you've come from, what you value, how you've grown up, and maybe we can help understand and even educate each other better. In special education, we have to actually rule out cultural factors as a reason,
as a disabling condition.
As a disabling condition. Yeah. So you really nailed it right there.
The teacher, when we're identifying and determining eligibility for special education, they have to make a statement. It's not a result of their culture. Yeah. The only way they can really know that is by inviting the child in and understanding. We've had experiences where educators have realized things about the culture in the household that explained why the child was learning things in a certain way, and it was such a revelation. They said, no wonder. So then they had a whole different approach for that child. It was very insightful and very helpful for people. I have one more question for Randy.
Well, I just want to say one thing on that topic.
Please. Yeah, please.
It doesn't just include inviting the child and the parent, but it's hiring a tribal person within the staff, because within our culture, we tend to open up with someone that looks like us. And so when you have a Native American child with certain needs, they're not gonna open up as quick as one would hope. If you have a tribal staff or tribal counselor that understands how we think, because there is a different mentality that we as Native peoples do have. And I would suggest, definitely in the health field, having Native American staff is important.
Beautiful. I love that idea.
Randy, you've not only substantiated our beliefs because of SHIVER-B, you've actually stepped up and trained us in it and made a good point for our listeners. That was powerful and right on. As we wrap up here, I have a question for you. What do you want your legacy to be when all is said and done, and you're looking back and people are looking at the influence that Randy Teton has made? what will your legacy have been at all the levels that you do and have worked on in public relations? What do you want your legacy to be?
I would hope that my legacy would be to develop more relationships off the reservation because, again, we are not going anywhere as Native peoples. A reservation is never going to go away. That reservation will be there time immemorial. And it's important for the local city and counties to build that relationship. And I feel that all the work that I have done in my previous positions, building relationships has always been so important. Being part of boards, being part of committees is so essential to building the relationships with other professionals because I really do feel it starts with those workers, those professionals that are taking that information back to their workplace. And it only makes them think like, oh, hey, never would have thought about that, but let's engage the tribes. So I really feel that, my legacy would be to continue to build those bridges, to be part of the local neighbors, to be a good neighbor.
Oh, that's nice.
I love that, Randy. Thank you for sharing that about your legacy. And if I may pay you a compliment, friend, in the years I've known you, and even right now, whenever I see you post something or share where you've been or what you're doing, you're actually building relationships in real time every day, wherever you're going, whatever council or board you're on, whatever group you're teaching or educating, you're building relationships in real time. So for whatever it's worth, you're actually living your legacy right now, and that's one of the biggest reasons we respect you. So thanks for sharing.
Yeah, thank you so much for being with us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've had some lovely takeaways here, and I love that idea of moccasins one day and heels the next day. That just really speaks to me. So you go, girl.
Absolutely.
Thank you. It's happened once or twice in my previous position. I'm in moccasins in the morning and then I'm in heels in the afternoon.
That's fabulous.
Which is the heart of, like she said, we need to be invited in to understand why that is and why she's able to do that. Randy?
So you're still here. Reservations will never go away. Kids learn to navigate moccasins to high heels. I appreciate that you said when you are in a work environment, you understand the rules and the dress and the code of that work environment. And when you go home, you understand your role as the auntie.
And the mother.
And the mother, yes.
It's a balance act. And I just want to say, kudos to all the single parents out there, whether you're a mother or father raising your child or children, kudos to you. Keep that motivation, keep your head high. I definitely know how it is at times. It's a struggle. But again, the power of prayer and the power of motivation of yourself, it really keeps me going. And so anyone out there listening, definitely follow me. As Jonathan mentioned, I'm always posting positive things, and I do continue to keep in connection with my tribal friends, whether they're from New York to California. I love what I do. So
Excellent.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. We'll have contact information that people will have so that they can follow you. But thank you so much for your time.
Well, we'll make sure people can follow you and have access to you. Randy, as a colleague and as a friend, I also want to thank you for coming on and teaching us and our listeners today about walking in two worlds, about how you were raised, the deeply sacred value of your household practices, and how they continue in your life today, and how you do walk in two worlds and influence the world around you because of who you've grown up as. That literally is the message. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
We appreciate you, Randy Teton. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we hope you've appreciated this conversation with Randy Teton. We'll have her contact information for you. We'll encourage you to follow her. She is an influence for good on many levels. And we think
good influencer.
Absolutely.
She's an influencer.
Absolutely. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Invite Me In podcast show. Thanks again to Miss Randy Teton. Until next time, this is where experience and passion come to heal. See you next time.
Bye.